So hi, good morning, everyone. So thank you, Dr. Madhya, for the interesting talk about virtual reality. So in keeping with our digital team, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Associate Professor Dr. Lee Yu Kong from our department. So Yu Kong is also the head of e-learning faculty. And if you are not aware, then our medical students are really actively using a version of a virtual patients which Yu Kong led. So today he's taking a step further and he will share with us how his team is culturally adapting a European-based virtual patient platform for our Southeast Asian curriculum. So this is a big multinational research project backed by an impressive 3.6 million ringgit Erasmus grant. And so I think I'll hand this over to Yukong. Yukong, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Ng, for the kind introduction. And thanks to Dr. Mazia and Prof. Najib for setting us up, I think, very well with the idea that when we are trying to learn about new environments, the concept of virtual reality or simulation is very important. It applies not just to things that are very future oriented, like space travel, but even for our own everyday practice here in the medical school in Faculty of Medicine. So let me just share my slides, and I'll talk a bit about the project that we are working on to try and introduce some kind of virtual reality training, virtual patient training to our medical students. Okay, so I'll be talking a bit about virtual patients, but in a more global context. So the topic of my talk today is sustaining global e-learning resources, how we culturally adapt European virtual patients for Southeast Asian health curricula. I'm not a doctor myself, but having worked with the primary care department across more than 10 years already, I think I realized that it's a very challenging thing to train medical students. So a 35-year-old patient could walk into a clinic and complain of a stomach ache, and then this could lead to any variety of diagnosis. And so is it a student's dilemma? Is it that the student needs to be trained to memorize millions of facts and countless pathways to be able to understand what to do when one symptom appears that could lead to multiple diagnoses? Or is it a trainer's dilemma? How does a medical lecturer look at a raw student and say that in 5 years' time I'm going to produce a competent doctor who's able to choose the right processes, who is able to navigate what we call clinical reasoning effectively, in order to arrive at the most accurate diagnosis? And so that leads us to this concept of clinical reasoning, which is, as I quote here from Gruppen, this is a very complex process of arriving at the most probable diagnosis. And how a student is trained to do that is that they have their own set of biomedical knowledge. They have their own set of biomedical knowledge, and then this helps them to form a case representation of the problem. Then from there, they add on additional information that they get from the patient or from lab tests. And this process of repeating the information gathering, revising the various steps of how you go about it logically, eventually leads to their own set of illness scripts. And Custis says that this illness scripts actually become something that's ingrained, but it's only through repeated exposure to multiple pathways, to multiple cases, that you are able to develop a strong library of illness scripts that enables a doctor to effectively navigate clinical reasoning. And so, coming from a background in psychology, I think about this illness script problem from a psychological viewpoint of the fast and slow thinking systems. So, for a slow system, the training of a student, I was thinking about it. In terms of chance, how many patients can a medical student possibly see or encounter just by pure chance in order for them to build an adequate set of illness scripts? What about reinforcement? Even if they were to see one patient, how many times could they see the same case in order to reinforce what they need to do with a certain disease or symptom? And what about training? Even if they were to see a case repeatedly, whether they need guidance from a more experienced clinician, from some kind of feedback of a standardized kind of system or protocol to help them get better at understanding what they need to change, what they're lacking in, where they need to strengthen their clinical reasoning skills. And finally, as we aim to produce competent doctors, if they want to exit medical school and make critical, time-sensitive, life-saving decisions in real life, how can we put this system together properly, or enhance this training system in order for them to be good doctors when they competent doctors when they graduate? And so we go back to Custer's definition of how do you make a good doctor for diagnostic purposes. Illness scripts developed through repeated exposure to illness cases. I'd like to here then introduce the concept of virtual patient. Um, this some text taken from description of a virtual patient from from a from a very uh, from a paper, I would say. So you can see a student is shown an image of a real patient. The conclusion depicts the symptom, acute pain from a myocardial infarction, presented with a choice of varieties of drugs, some of which should be beneficial to the patient. And then the student performs an experiment, and all the information then changes on the screen according to what the student is deciding to do. So where did this come from? If you look at the year, this was published in Nursing Research in 1966. So the concept of using technology to help students develop their illness scripts or the clinical reasoning skills is actually something that's been around for a long time. You can see here, they even have a picture in black and white, no less, from this study. And here's another one from 3 years later in 1969 in the Lancet, where students at the University of Leeds were using some kind of computerized system to train their clinical reasoning skills. And so, building on from even the 1960s, virtual patients have been in use for almost 5 decades now, 7 decades now. So, a virtual patient refers to any kind of software that allows case-based training. So, students presented with a virtual patient case, and then they work through it systematically. It often tries to simulate real-life clinical scenarios. And then the student is able to use a role of a healthcare provider to obtain history, conduct physical exams, make diagnostic and therapeutic decisions, all within a controlled environment. And the whole idea of a virtual patient is that instead of just biomedical information, it actually simulates the patient's particular clinical presentation with as close to consistency and realism to a real life case as possible. So often virtual patients will be drawn from real life cases that students expected to see or treat in real life. At the Faculty of Medicine, as Prof mentioned earlier, we have developed a virtual patient software called MyVAP at and both he and I were part of this team, which came about during COVID when we were a bit concerned about whether COVID was going to affect the access of our medical students to real patients. Of course, eventually COVID cleared up, but we were left with a software that was fully functioning, and eventually we were able to adapt it with Prof. Lau Yiling's help for use in the PBL syllabus. But my reflections on this MyVIP is it was very complex. Building our own software involved a mix of both clinical, technical, and as well as the maintenance side of building your own software. But it was bespoke. We were able to tailor the cases in our software for our patients, for our students. We use PBL cases that have been written about real patients by our own clinicians. And for me, this is very valuable. We are capturing and codifying and preserving actually the knowledge that our professors, that our lecturers have put down on paper into a format that can be used and reused constantly to try and teach what they've learned to the students. There was a high degree because of the PBL cases, as I mentioned, to the biomedical, the clinical, as well as even the cultural information that we gather as part of our clinical reasoning in our everyday practice. In everyday practice. But This process of building our own software was expensive. It was hard to it was challenging to develop it, and it was also challenging to continue to maintain it. So, given that the tool seems to work well, how can we expand the use of virtual patients to other partners, other countries who might benefit from this resource? What we realized very quickly as we move into this space was that the resources for virtual patients exist online, worldwide, and are maintained usually as a for-profit. So you can either pay for a license, commercial virtual patient, or there's another form of a group called, like, what I would call a consortia-driven group, which has an interest in the software, probably based in an academic institution, interested to use digital technologies to improve training of students, and they are maintaining and building a working group to use virtual patients. And one such consortia exists, actually, a very large consortia exists in Europe, actually. In 1993, there was a software called Casus that was kind of like a software that enabled users to enter and program their own virtual patients. And so it's from the 1990s, but it's been maintained and upgraded until now. From this one, a eVIP project was started. VIP, of course, stands for virtual patient. And they use four different types of software: Campus, Casus, Open Labyrinth, and WebSP. So there were many different types of softwares that were built for virtual patients, open access, open source, all maintained by different universities or consortia. This project eventually became WAVES, which is widening access to virtual educational scenarios, which started to involve some partners from the Southeast Asian side. So you can see here, Lee Kong Chian School of Medicine was part of this project right before COVID. During In 2020 to 2022, there was a program to set up a clinical reasoning curriculum. So they started to look at virtual patients not just from the software itself, but how do you integrate it into curricula? How do you say that I want to use this and I'm going to be able to adapt it for the medical curriculum that I have in my institution? And finally, what happened was this consortia grew into iCovid, where they started to not just talk about the software, not just talk about the framework for implementation, but also then to build virtual patients. And they built 200 virtual patients across different case presentations, and made them freely available in French, English, German, Polish, Portuguese, and Spanish. So you can see this is very much based in the European side of the world. But from here, taking from the last slide, the last point, where we have 200 free virtual patients available for worldwide use. And the question is, why isn't it be taken up by more users? I think many people who have not been part of this long running consortia would be unfamiliar with virtual patients. We would experience implementation and technical issues with using a software, as well as perhaps this idea of cultural compatibility, where if you take a case from a European setting, and they talk about food, or they talk about relationships, or even the types of tests that are available in those settings, it will be unfamiliar for people who are outside of that setting, actually, as health systems differ across the world. And so we managed to get some funding from the EU for the Chapter C project, which involves Malaysian partners, Indonesian partners, and two partners from Poland as well as Sweden. So Jagiellonian University from Poland and Karolinska Institute from Sweden. What we did is we set up a consortia that enabled some kind of transfer or training between the EU partners of how to use virtual patients, how to implement virtual patients into Malaysia as well as Indonesia, across medicine, pharmacy, and nursing. And so this is the training that was held in Poland. What we want to do in this project is that we want to enhance the curricula. We want to improve how digital resources are used in the syllabus of a program. We also were looking very particularly at cultural adaptation. saying that although the library of virtual patients 200 are available for free, they may feel foreign to our students and trainers in this part of the world. The call for digital capacity building is very strong. So you see later at the end of this presentation that there are many such projects. And in fact, there's enough of them to talk about trying to set up a consortium for digital transformation in the Southeast Asian region of medical curricula. And lastly, there's a strong element of knowledge transfer. So the project, uh, so as you could see from the slide of the history of visual patients in Europe, there's almost 30, 40 years of training and resources available. So some of the key partners that were involved in these projects from the very beginning are part of training the Southeast Asian partners. All this is very important because of situativity. What I've come to know as situativity theory, as we aim to adapt the virtual patients. So situativity theory says that when we learn, there's a social nature to cognition, meaning and learning. It's important to look at not just the participants, but also the environment as where they are going to be learning, as well as the interaction between the participants. Um, and so the whole idea of this is that when we take resources from elsewhere, uh, learning is fundamentally social and cultural. And social elements are not seen as noise, uh, but rather they are seen as important elements that need to be considered when we are implementing changes into our curricula. And so applied to e-learning resources like virtual patients, tools are inert, so you could use them, but they may not actually connect with our learners unless they are made interdependent to our setting, to either Indonesian or Malaysian settings. And so because of this, what we wanted to do is we wanted to adapt virtual patient cases to the social and the cultural settings for medicine, nursing, and pharmacy across Malaysia and Indonesia. We knew this was important because we had done some work. This is a project, a very early research project that I did with Prof. Christopher Boyd, Prof. CJ, Dr. Azana Yauman from the pediatrics department, where we adapted online breastfeeding course from European settings for use in Malaysia and Thailand. And you can see that one of the comments when we interviewed the users was that when we tailor it to this was not a formal tailoring process. We just asked, we just looked through it and did what we felt was needed for making the course usable in Malaysia and Thailand. And so some users would say it's very useful when you put in local elements because you can compare requirements. I can see what's different between the countries. But some people would say that when you put in things that are foreign to me, it's really not useful for me. So there's this tension between what is good tailoring, what is tailoring that doesn't fit the user's requirements. And so for the Chapter C project, we said let's work on it more systematically. So we have Waldorf's framework, which is Jan Waldorf. He looked at virtual patients in Germany and said, can I look at the cultural elements of a virtual patient? What are the cultural elements that need to be looked at? And he produced a checklist of 5 different criteria: the diagnostic procedures, therapeutic procedures, the roles that may differ across countries, ethical principles that may be different, such as cultural or legal norms, as well as, of course, the language related to medical terminology that people may be unfamiliar with. And then in Chapter C, when we met, we added 3 more elements. And so you can see that on top of the 5 elements that were in the original framework, we added social, cultural, and social linguistic adaptations, healthcare system adaptations to reflect the way people access and use healthcare in different countries, as well as possibly epidemiological adaptations, because disease patterns might be different in terms of distribution or prevalence. And so we asked the partners to choose 6 cases each to be implemented in their curriculum. They worked systematically through the 6 cases. Actually, they took it out into a Word file and then they mapped each of the adaptations according to the framework that I showed you earlier. And then these frameworks from the Word file, we then counted the changes and coded them according to the different types of cultural adaptations. And you can see here that when they were asked to select the cases, most of them would select the cases from the library of 200 pages, the ones that were of high prevalence. So this would probably be the ones that people would go for the first if you have a free library, right? The ones that you're going to use the most in the syllabus, in the setting. But you can also see that people also selected cases from 200 that were life-threatening, that were rarely seen, that could be used to cap off a block of learning. So there are various reasons for people to select the different cases for adaptation. And here, I'll just show you uh, what were the most common to the least common adaptations in terms of the adaptations that we counted across all the cases. So the first one was diagnostic procedures. And you can see that it's mostly to do with some the investigations that are not used in our usual practice. So when we're adapting resources, the people probably look at what's available or not in terms of uh, their lab settings. The next one was sociocultural and linguistic adaptations. So you can see these are the usual ones. You don't want to use a foreign, don't want to use a picture of a white person. You want to change it to something more local. You don't want to have southern France and Paris, which would be incongruent in our settings. You want to change it to Kuala Lumpur. The third one was language. So you can see that some of the terms that were used in the virtual pages were unfamiliar to our students or not used in our setting. So Blumberg's sign, please change to rebound tenderness was one adaptation with. Professional roles will also change. So you can see one from the pharmacy in Taylor's. They said remove the question of ECG interpretation because pharmacists are not required to interpret ECGs. So it depends on your target student group. So because the pharmacists were one group that were using the virtual patient, some of their roles would not involve some of the procedures. For healthcare system adaptations, overseas they use intern, here we use houseman. So we changed that. Therapeutic procedures, instead of referring to European guidelines, at the end of a case, we changed it to refer to Malaysian CPG. And finally, the last one was epidemiological adaptations. So, for example, we know that especially in our multicultural setting, we have our own figures for prevalence between the different ethnicities. So you can see here that this one we've adapted it to show that there's higher prevalence for certain disease in the Malaysian Indian population. It also changed a bit when we break it down by university. For example, University Gajah Mada it's a nursing faculty. So they did a lot of changes to the virtual patients because their students were going to be nursing students. And so you can see there'll be some variation across all the universities depending on what kind of students they're hoping to train in their programs. So I'd just like to wrap up this presentation by saying that with three learning points. So the first one is that when we're choosing to take resources from elsewhere, I think we can either do it very simplistically, like you saw in the early project that I did. We just said maybe we should try and change some of these things to be more local. Maybe we should put in some local data so that it doesn't feel so alien to people in our setting. Or I think a more useful approach would be having a framework-driven approach. So either some kind of like guidance on how you're going to specifically look for things that you need to change in the e-learning resources that we are adapting for our setting. And this will make a difference to our learners because of the whole idea of situativity. The sustainability of resources is the other one that I think is of particular importance when we go into anything that's virtual reality or e-learning or digital learning. A lot of these projects will not go beyond the lifetime of the project without a group to sustain it, without a consortia to sustain it, without the jump of project to project that continues to build on what is being used earlier. And so I think from this project, what we can see is that it's possible to use resources from elsewhere to redistribute or share them across universities or partners that come from less resource economies, such as Malaysia, Indonesia, and other parts of this region actually. And what I'm hoping to do is actually use this project to seed, together with other partners, to seed a EU Southeast Asia regional network for digital learning. So so Castles has been around. I showed you 1993, and we're still using it until today. Of course, it's been upgraded, but it's still good. It's still fit for purpose. And then lastly, you can see here there are four different projects that are happening uh, uh, across this current 2 or 3 years. And what we're hoping to do with Chapter C, with UMHealth VR, with Distant DSS, with Decredo, is to try and build a larger network of training. So, uh, so I think this is just an acknowledgement of funding as well as a disclaimer that the views are not representative of the European Union. And with that, I just thank you for your attention for the talk this morning. Thank you very much.
Okay. No, thanks, Yufang. I think it's very interesting to hear this talk. Although I've heard this before, it's always nice to hear it from you again. And interesting to see how virtual station has started since 1966, right? That's quite long, right? But let's go on to the questions and answers. And I think Prof Chan has a question for you. So in the Q&A, she's asking, as you build up the repertoire of patients, do you see a transfer of virtual patients back to developed countries so that the entity becomes global in reach? I mean, to some extent, you talk about resource sharing to countries with a lower economic status, but how about to the developed countries?
Yeah. So actually, this one, Prof. Chan, this is a very good question. Um, what we are seeing is actually the Southeast Asian partnerships energize the European consortia. So in fact, because I think actually it's good and bad that you've been working on the virtual patient software for almost 50 years. By that time you kind of feel like you've tried everything already. And then actually when they came to Southeast Asia and they agreed to partner with us, and then this whole aspect of cultural adaptation, because they cannot do it in a European setting, everything there is quite homogeneous, or it's been saturated already. When they came here and they saw the differences and how we were expanding the software, they said that actually this is like a shot in the arm for their software and for their projects. It has expanded the software, it has sustained the software, it's beginning to show them new things that are possible with their software. So I think we are very encouraged to hear that from the EU side.
Yeah, and following out, that's something come to my mind is, I mean, they are also developed countries with more and more higher Asian representation there from the immigrations, and that could be a platform where these cases could be relevant as well. Yeah. So yeah, we have another question from Dr. Jaslan. He's asking, is there issues with copyright when we are using this virtual patient system from the consortium?
Okay, yeah, this is a very interesting question as well. So thanks, Justin, for the question. So I'll just share that I've been in 3 or 4 EU. I talk about the EU ones especially. The EU is almost every project. They are as a funder, they will try to open up the outcomes of a project to open access using a Creative Commons license for their copywriting. So they do copyright their IP, but under their funding clause, they usually would want it to be available for free or open access to others. So I'll give a story where we started with Accord. There's another project that is not related to virtual patients, but it was also EU funded. The developing reusable learning objects. The trainer from Nottingham gave us a full day set, almost like a half day session on understanding the copyrights as well as the whole idea of Creative Commons, so that we both get the copyright, but it's available for free uh, for worldwide use. So I think European projects will tend towards that format. So everyone in the project has this ethos of the resources having to be shared eventually.
Okay. Thanks, Yukong, for that. So I think we are down to our last 5 minutes. Perhaps in this final moments, can you just maybe share with us, moving forward, um, what can we expect from the development of this virtual patient, maybe in our faculty, for example?
Right. Okay. So I think that's a good way to end because actually you can see I think I didn't show you some you saw some screenshots earlier, and what you realize is that the software itself is since the 1990s as well as the one that we developed for MyVIP. Even in a short space of time, they do look like they're from a different era already. So the next phase for our faculty is actually not driven by me, but I'd be very happy to mention Prof. Anand's name. So Prof. Anand Shanmugan, our deputy dean for postgraduate, he's big into AI, and parallel to what we were doing with MyVIP, he had begun to develop AI-based virtual patients, which solve a lot of the programming issues, which solve a lot of the adaptation issues that we were facing with traditional software. And so he's been working with a team to build almost number one, it's responsive. You can actually chat with the patient. Number two, it's probably going to have more localized elements like voice-based interaction with almost like Malaysian accents. So building the situativity elements even stronger than what we currently are able to do with Kasus with MyVIP. So I think I'm also looking forward for that, really.
Okay, I am also looking forward. I'm looking forward to use it as a clinician myself as well. Yeah. Okay. One last question to wrap up this talk. So Prof. Adina is asking, well, since CASOS has been around for such a long time, is there any long-term evidence of the impact of using the virtual patients on our medical students?
Right. Okay. So I'll be very honest here. Our initial virtual patient when we launched it, because of the so it's like you can think of it like a peak and then it went down. So because the initial response to technology is always there, people are very excited to use, and then as the limitations of technology become apparent, then the excitement will begin to wane. So initially there was we managed to publish a study to show that when you use virtual patients, it does improve clinical reasoning confidence. But I think after a while, as the technology becomes a bit dated, then students' enthusiasm begin to drop for the virtual patients that we currently have. So I think Kasus is a good platform to try and use in our setting because it's got a much longer and more simpler interaction. So students won't find the cognitive load too high for Kasus. But then the AI one will probably be hopefully you have this peak of people being enthusiastic about it, but also sustaining the use because of the comfort level of the user-centered design that Anand and I are trying to use for that software. So hopefully not like that, but like that and sustain.
Okay. Okay. I think thanks again, Yukong, for the talk, and also thanks the audience for the questions because they make up a good discussion here. And we look forward to the future implementation of the next version of virtual patients in our faculty. So I think with that, we'll wrap up our session for today. So thank you everyone for listening so far and have a good day ahead.